I'm going to restart my recording here, and let's get started. So I'm going to share my screen and show you what I've got going on here. All right, so what I did was I went into web forms and I just started a blank offer, how to complete an offer. And then we're going to go through a couple of things here. Before I really get too deep into this, a note on getting the information correct. It's pretty important that, let me just do this. It's pretty important that you use accurate information. Would you guys agree with that?
Yes.
If you're not verifying the information very, very carefully, you can get your client in a lot of trouble. You can get yourself in a lot of trouble. So please don't rely on just the listing that you see in the MLS system. And even worse, if it's somebody from out of board listing property up here, you know they're going to screw it up. So make sure you verify everything. The number one source is the seller themselves. Right? If it's your client, fantastic. You can maybe talk to the sellers about getting a copy of a survey. If you can get actual documents from the property, warranty information, permit information, maybe they've got the documents from when they purchased the property. Go right to the source if you can. If you're working for a buyer and you're filling out an offer, again, use GeoWarehouse, ask for copies of surveys if they have them, go right to the municipality and get the information you need. Please just don't rely on someone else's listing. As Constantine says over and over again, and I love this phrase, garbage in, garbage out. So if you rely on someone else's garbage, your offer is not going to be correct. Okay, so just keep that in mind as we go forward through this. Now, I did talk about filling out an offer, but I do want to touch on the confirmation of cooperation and representation as well, because I do see a fair number of errors on this, and I just want to make sure that everybody's using it correctly. Okay, so filling out the buyer and seller information on this is pretty straightforward. You have to go to the 4 blanks here. Make sure you put in the property address here. Here's where I start to see mistakes. In checking these boxes. So often the listing brokerage, this box is checked, and that's correct because the listing brokerage in 99% of cases probably has an agreement to represent the seller, right? There are mere postings out there where a listing representative hasn't actually provided any representation to the seller, but those are the exceptions, so we're going to set that aside for the moment. For now, the listing brokerage represents the interest of the seller in this transaction, and it is further understood and agreed, and this part gets forgotten, surprisingly. You need to choose one of these boxes, so either number 1 or number 2 under this section here. So the listing brokerage is not representing or providing customer service to the buyer, or the listing brokerage is providing customer service to the buyer. So you would use this box if you had a buyer under customer service, right? So you're double-ending it, but it's not multiple representation. So you've got the listing, and you've got the buyer, but the buyer is a customer and not a client. This is the correct way to do this, okay? But again, most cases, the listing representative is representing the seller, so you need to check this box as well. So it's both of these to make this part correct, okay? If it is multiple representation, and in Century 21, either you or someone else at Century 21 United Realty is representing both the buyer and the seller, then the only box you check is this one. You leave the listing brokerage boxes blank. You leave the cooperating brokerage boxes blank. You leave it all blank. The only one you check is that multiple representation box, okay? Then you have to come down here, and they must initial buyer and seller's initials here. It says to be completed only if the brokerage is representing more than one client for the transaction. Since we can't compel anybody to sign anything, if one of those parties says, no, I don't consent to multiple representation, I don't want you to represent both parties in this transaction, guess what? You've got to then turn that buyer or seller over to another company. It can't be Century 21 that handles this transaction, that end of the transaction. If somebody says, I'm not comfortable with this, and they refuse to consent for multiple representation, everything stops, and you have to send that over to another company. Now, would I do it for free? Not likely. I would be getting consent for a referral fee on the referral document and sending it over to another company, to an agent that I trust, okay? But that's that multiple representation. So typically, 75% of our deals, 75 to 76%, are single agency. So we're going to listing rep these 2 boxes here. And I'm going to scroll down to the second page, and the cooperating brokerage representation. We've got to fill this in properly as well. Typically, again, the buyer is represented under a representation agreement. So we're going to check the first box. The cooperating brokerage represents the interest of the buyer in this transaction, right? That's typically the way it goes. Now, again, we could have a listing and the cooperating agent might have a buyer under customer service. They're not representing them, but they've got control of that buyer. So the second box would be checked. Or if you were representing a buyer or working with a buyer under customer service, you would check that box, okay? The cooperating brokerage is not representing the buyer and has not entered into an agreement to provide customer service. That's an unusual one, but it can happen. There are unrepresented parties out there. They've refused to sign a customer service agreement. They've refused buyer representation, but the cooperating brokerage still thought they would bring them along and bring their buyer to the table. And it's perfectly, it's okay. It's legal. There's nothing wrong with it. It's very unusual, but just so you know, it is okay to see it that way, okay? So we would do 3A, and then we have to go down here and describe how is the cooperating brokerage going to get paid. Now, if it's multiple rep, I said before, we don't check multiple rep and go down here and put in commission. Because it's multiple rep, there is no cooperating brokerage, right? There's only one brokerage involved. But in this case, we're representing the seller or we're representing the buyer. We've got to fill one of these boxes in, okay? Typically, you would check this box and put in 2.5%, 2.5% right there, okay? That's typically the way we do it. I often see people put in plus HST, also correct. There's nothing wrong with that, okay? Any questions so far?
No.
No, okay. You could also put in here, if you know, for example, in advance, and it's hard to do when there's 100 of us, I know it's hard to do, but let's say Tom had a buyer under representation and Monica had a buyer under representation. You could put in this box here, the cooperating brokerage represents more than one buyer offering on this property. You'd make a notation there. I would suggest you have the initial on the side right here too, just to draw attention to it. And then carry on as you normally would, okay? It's unusual. We don't often know about it in advance, but when you do and you have an opportunity, I would be filling this in here so that nobody can say later, I didn't tell anybody. I didn't share that information. I kept it to myself and I was trying to do something shady. Just disclose it. It's not going to harm your position, okay? And the rest of this is pretty straightforward, I think. Fill in the blanks. Any other questions on this form before I move on? Okay.
Yeah, I have a question.
Okay.
So say I have a buyer putting in an offer and I put in the offer and I'm told there's another offer, but they don't tell me that it's somebody from Century 21. That's multiple representation, correct?
Yes, it is.
What happens then?
You don't know about it, so you just do the best you can, right? If you don't know in advance, it would be impossible for you to complete this section,
Okay.
right? So if you find out, put it in. If you don't know, you don't know. This happens all the time, Stacy. Don't worry about it. But if you do know in advance, then please fill it in.
Yeah, well, it happened to me. Yeah, I was told a week later.
Yeah, and it happens all the time. Just like when we're doing listing presentations, right? Sometimes you'll find out after the fact that I was competing against you, right? The seller didn't tell me I was competing against another Century 21 rep, but it turns out I was. Same thing happens here. 2 Century 21 reps represent buyers on the same property. Sometimes it's many. I sat in on an offer with Dean a couple of years ago. I don't know if you remember, Dean, down on Barbara Crescent. There was about 21 offers, and you had 4 of them.
Yeah.
So I sat in on that one. Dean knew she had 4 offers, so she had all of her buyers do the paperwork, just like I'm suggesting, if I recall correctly. But there were other buyers that came in that from our office. I think 11 of the 21 were Century 21 offers. But not everybody knew that in advance. So not everybody filled this in, and that's okay. You just do the best you can. Okay, does that answer your question? Okay. All right.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to go to the agreement of purchase and sale now. Now, I want to preface this by saying most people are doing this correctly. I see some weird things happen from time to time, and that's really why I wanted to go over this today, particularly for newer agents. But some of the more experienced ones tend to make mistakes too. Sometimes they're in a hurry. Sometimes it's been a while since they had to craft one themselves, maybe, and they've always had the office do this for them, and now they're trying to do it themselves. So I just wanted to go through some of the often incorrectly completed parts of the form if I can, okay? This part here, putting in the date of the agreement, this agreement of purchase and sale dated this blank day of blank. This is the date the form is created. And once it's been input, it doesn't change. once you start the process, I don't care if the client signs tomorrow and it gets negotiated and signed back 3 or 4 times over the next week, this date doesn't change, okay? I've had people come back and bring me an offer in sign back asking for advice, and they've, one of the changes that they made when they were doing their sign back was they actually changed the date of the agreement. That's incorrect. So please leave that part static, okay? Address of the property, that's pretty straightforward stuff. Fronting on what side of the road, this one is often left blank, and that's okay. Technically speaking, you can leave these blanks empty. I checked with Aria on this because I saw a lot of people doing it. So I actually called them and said, "What do you got? What's your position on this? You've provided the form for us, but I see people leaving a blank. Are you okay with that?" And they said, "Yes, it's really in there for as a convenience. Where it's important might be for properties that haven't yet been built on, vacant land." Because I'm not sure if everybody knows, if you buy a piece of vacant land in the country that's never been built on before, it won't have a street address, right? The street address isn't given until a building permit has been applied for. So if there's no street address, I can't put in, number 3 Front Street, Hastings in here. I've got to put Front Street, Hastings, fronting on the north side so that we can more carefully identify the location of the property. So that's when that really becomes a necessity. Don't get too hung up on this, but I always did try to fill it in. And the rule of thumb is if you're facing the house, from the street, the direction you're facing is what you put in here. So if I'm looking at a house that's at 200 Park Hill Road, I know that even numbers are on the north side in Peterborough. That's on the north side. But if I'm facing the house, I'm going to be looking north. So I know that to put in here, this is the north side of the road. Okay, does that make sense to everybody? So that's the easy way to think of it. Look at the house and what direction are you facing? That's the direction, that's the side of the road it's on. Easy way to remember, okay? Right here, this is looking for the municipality, the town, the city of whatever area it happens to be in, right? Township of Asphodel Norwood, for example. Here's one that gets messed up a lot, and I've talked about this in web forms classes, the frontage and depth of the property. I'm seeing far too much of this. 50 by 100. 50 what? 100 what? You need to put in the measurements here. We're talking about meters. That's perfectly okay. Make sure you got your data correct. If it's 50 feet, then put 50 feet, okay? I would suggest you don't use 50 FT. It's a short form. I know it's convention. I know we all know what it means, but it's a short form. So if there's anything that can lead to an ambiguity, I would avoid. Actually spell it out 50 feet, okay? Worse yet, don't put in 50 feet like that. Again, it's convention. I know we all know what it means, but if somebody, what if we were dealing with a new Canadian who hadn't seen this before, right? And we talked to them about 50 feet. They understood the property as 50 feet, but they see this mark and they don't understand what they're signing. Just spell it out, okay? Same thing for both frontage and depth. Here's a question for you. If you don't know the depth of the property, what should I put in here? Should I put in 50 feet by 0.25 acre? Like that, 2.25 acres. Is that correct? Anybody want to try it out and answer? Hello?
No, it's not correct.
It's not correct. Why?
Because it's not 50 feet by 2.25 acres. You just leave it blank if you don't know.
It says right here a depth of. A depth is a linear measurement. Acres is an area measurement. Yeah. So it doesn't, so leave it blank. If you don't know reliably and accurately what the depth of the property is, leave it blank, okay? Don't try to don't put irregular, like irreg, I've seen that. Irregular, again, irregular is not a measurement, okay? So leave it blank. If you don't know what it is, leave it out of there, okay? Again, this is like the side of the road thing. It's there as a convenience. The most important thing is the legal description, right? We got to make sure that that is correct. So the frontage and depth. Yep.
If you're getting your dimensions from Geo Warehouse and the depth is different on each side of the property, you're using the shortest one as long as they're close?
No, I'd leave it out because it's an irregularly shaped property, and any depth that I might quote there would be incorrect. So I would leave it out. Just put the frontage in and the legal description, leave the depth out. Okay. Yeah, it's just safer all around for everybody. I understand the rationale behind that. You're putting in the short measurements, so you're being conservative, but it's not correct, so I wouldn't use it. Okay. All right, so legal description, I would get the legal description. Again, best source is a survey, right? Second best source is Geo Warehouse. Third best would be like a tax bill, something like that. But even then, I've seen some messed up legal descriptions on tax bills. And it really doesn't matter because they're just trying to get the appropriate amount of taxes for the property to pay the bills for the municipality and whatnot. So it doesn't matter that it's incorrect on the tax bill. It's not a big deal, but it is a big deal on the agreement of purchase and sale. Because if you have the wrong legal description on here and the buyer's lawyer goes and does a search and it's the wrong property, you could get yourself in a lot of trouble here. Okay, so a survey is the very best source of information. Geo Warehouse is a good source of information. A tax bill is okay. So in that order is my suggestion to you. Okay. This part's pretty straightforward. Oh, right here, the deposit. So the deposit holder is the name of the company without the word brokerage. The word brokerage that you see here often, and in fact, the system will automatically populate this. When you tell the system to draft an offer for you, often web forms will put this in here for you, and they put the word brokerage in there. But the word brokerage is not part of the company name, so it's not necessary. Don't freak out if you see an offer that doesn't have that word in there. And if you're typing one from scratch, you don't need to put that in there. Century 21 United Realty Inc. is the name of the company. The word brokerage is a term that RICO requires that we add for marketing purposes only. Okay, everybody clear on that? That's again, it's not really an error. It's just it's not necessary, and my little brain just looks at it as muddying things because it's just too much. Okay, so really not necessary. Schedules. So by default, all of our offers have a Schedule A, right? Even if it's just a one-liner, a cash one-liner. Buyer agrees to pay the balance of the purchase price, all the extra verbiage that goes with it, that's on a Schedule A. But often we have to add a Schedule B. Sometimes it's for interest-bearing trust account clauses. Sometimes it's for additional terms around a building contract, or maybe you want to attach a survey as part of the agreement. So you might put that in Schedule B or C. I've done them up to Schedule H. It really doesn't matter. But you do need to identify them here on the first page. So I see often like that, and that's okay. What I would prefer to see is just stick the word "and" in there. It's a grammatical thing that just bugs my little brain. I don't know about you guys. It's okay, leave it like this, but just I like to make it make sense. Just put the word "and" in there. Okay, it's just a little thing, but it's one of those little things that it can make a difference. Again, if you're in competition and you want your offer to stand out, it's one of those things you might want to pay attention to. Okay. Irrevocability is pretty straightforward. You guys know how to fill that in. Completion date, you know how to fill that in. Notices. This is one, surprisingly, that gets missed a lot. And I don't know why Sherry's information came up on my offer. This gets missed an awful lot. I will see people draft an offer and they might remember to put their email address in here, but they don't necessarily put the other one in. They leave this blank, okay? So, and you'll notice in the clause, it says, where the heck is it? Where a facsimile number or email address is provided herein, when transmitted electronically to that facsimile, it shall be deemed to be original. If you don't put an email address in here, guys, for the other brokerage or for the other agent, then you cannot email it to them. You must hand deliver hard copies to them, okay? So remember that. This clause, this number 3 notices, provided that these are actually filled in, that's what gives you permission to email your offer to the other side. If you don't fill this in, you cannot email it to them. You've got to deliver hard copies. Really important today when we are trying to stay away from people. But anytime, if you're in a time crunch and you need to get something back to somebody quick and you have to hand deliver it, you've shackled yourself. So make sure you fill this in. Don't leave it blank, okay? That one's important. Chattels included.
Doug, in that section, what about under multiple representation?
So on multiple representation, it says right here where a brokerage represents both of them, you can't be appointed. So I've seen 2 ways of handling this. I'm going to describe one that works but I don't like, and the second one that I do like. So one that I've seen that does work but I'm not crazy about is actually striking that sentence right out. So you draw a line through that bolded sentence there, have everybody initial it and consent to it, and now you can give and receive notices yourself. I would rather see in Schedule A, leave this blank. Okay, and in Schedule A, there is a clause that it's in the cheat sheets, and if anybody needs it, we can get Louisa to email that clause to you. That overrides this. It says where the email addresses are provided below, the buyer and seller do consent to receive notices via these addresses. Some other verbiage, I can't remember exactly what it says, but put that clause in Schedule A. That would be my preferred way of doing it. Either works. Okay, good question.
Yeah.
Anything else on that before I move on? Okay. Chattels. Chattels included. Go ahead, Stacy.
No, it's
Nope.
okay.
Okay.
I just have a husband irritating me here.
Oh, I thought maybe you were talking to the cat. Okay, chattels included. Is a hot water tank a chattel?
No, it'd be the same as a furnace.
It's like a furnace. It's bolted down. If you turn the house upside down and shake it, it doesn't fall out, right? Because it's bolted in. It's a hot water tank. So I will see often people will put in here hot water tank, and they'll actually put the word owned in there. Hot water tank owned. I don't know where this habit started. Stop it. It really just chaps me because it's a hot water. This is a chattel. Owned is a descriptor. Hot water tank owned is not a thing. I can't point to a hot water tank owned. I can point to a hot water tank, but I think I understand what people are trying to do here. They're trying to make a point. They're trying to say the hot water tank is not rented. We own it and it's included. But here's the thing. If it's not a rental, it's included by default. It's a mechanical item that is integral to the operation of the home. It's a fixture. Unless it's specifically excluded, it's included. So you don't need to put that in there, okay? Hot water tank owned, furnace owned, whatever owned. That's a bad habit, okay? You don't need to put those things in there, okay? Just make sure.
And the same would apply.
Go ahead,
Sorry,
Tom.
go ahead.
No, go ahead.
And the same would apply to all water treatment equipment?
Yes, if they own it, it's included because it's bolted in.
Yeah.
It's integral to the operation of that house, right?
Right.
If they want to take it with them, they need to specifically exclude it, okay?
Right.
And make some provision for repair. If they take a water treatment system out of the house and leave pipes dangling, that's not correct either. They've got to fix it.
Yeah.
Okay. I was going to mention, oh, go ahead.
Sorry, it's Lynn. I just wanted to ask you, like I have clients who often get very nervous about being not being specific enough because, you know, they've heard horror stories or whatever. Is it something we can kind of maybe put a little bit of wording in the offer? Just like, I don't know, how do you address that when your clients are concerned? Well, like, how come you haven't included that? Like, I want it to be clear that they understand that, you know, we expect that to be here.
If you want to add some extra verbiage around it in the schedule, you could do that,
Yeah.
but I think this is just the wrong place for it.
Okay.
And you need to just reassure your clients. I'm trying to find, it seems to me there might be something in the pre-printed portion. Maybe there isn't. If they want to be reassured, put something in Schedule A. It's not going to hurt anything. Again, I'm trying to create an atmosphere where you can create offers that are clean and simple and to the point, easy to accept without fluff. Okay.
Yeah.
Protect your client. Absolutely. But you got to make sure that it's easy to read and understand. If you start adding terms in here that don't make sense, this section's for chattels, not for fixtures. So it's a defined term, right?
Maybe there needs to be like another little section that says, like, you know, these are things that we all parties agree will be staying at the house. Like even garage door openers are, if you think about it, those are fixed. If you turn the house upside down, they're not going to fall out. But again, if you start leaving that out and your client gets there and they're gone, they're going to come back to you. Yep.
So, but then you're going to say to your client, you know what, I'm going to make a call to your lawyer right now and get them on this case because that should have been here. People try to pull fast ones from time to time, but my experience is it's not very often. Not very often. But when it happens, then you need to be there to fix it. If there's any concern whatsoever, I don't care if you want to put something in Schedule A to address it, but I just feel this is the wrong spot for it. Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Fixtures excluded, again, like if somebody wants to take a ceiling light with them, if they want to take the water treatment system with them or the garage door openers, then it needs to be identified here as an exclusion. Rental items, including lease to own. So this is where you would put in if the hot water tank was a PUC rental, or if it was Intercare or one of those other companies, or if they've got a rented water treatment system, you put that in here, okay? If it's one of those lease to own systems and you want the seller to pay it out, that should go in Schedule A. So you're going to identify it here as a rental item, and then you might be put in brackets, see Schedule A, and then in Schedule A, you have a clause that says the buyer is aware that there is a monthly payment of X dollars per month for the following 9 years. Or if the buyer wants it to be paid out, then you would address that again in Schedule A. Now, the seller agrees at the seller's expense to pay out and leave the system in place, right? And, worded in Schedule A to cover your client's interests, okay? Any questions on that? Okay. HST, this is a drop down, almost always going to be included in for resale homes, right? Very, very rare that would be in addition to, but there are certain instances. I really like, guys, I wish OREA would make a change here and just put the clause that's in the commercial form into the residential form where there is no drop down. It just says automatically, if the sale is subject to HST, it will be in addition to every single time. It says if, right? And if it's subject to, here's the thing, every property in the province is subject to HST unless they're exempt. And one of the exemptions is resale residential. That's why we don't pay HST when we sell homes or when we buy homes, because it's one of those exemptions that is allowed. But if they just change this to say it's always in addition to, and it was pre-printed, there's no choice, then it would solve a world of problems. I've seen deals die over this because people don't understand it. And it's not you, it's not me. The lawyers don't understand it. CRA doesn't understand it. You can call 5 different people and get 5 different answers at Canada Revenue. So it's a complicated, confusing thing. I wish they would simplify this for us. Okay, my thoughts. Title search. What's everybody using for a date for title search?
2 weeks before closing.
And that's typically what I suggest, 2 weeks before closing. Some lawyers will say, let us do it right away. Let's get this out of the way right now. And that's fine. My problem with that, and it's less of an issue today because our deals tend to close fairly quickly right now. In normal times, I should say, the before times. Deals were closing fairly quickly. So, it didn't matter so much. But if it was a long-term closing, and if you had a deal that was like 4 months, I'm getting a little on time here. You had a deal closing in 4 months, you might want to have your title, you don't want to have your title search too early because there's time for things to crop up. It might look good today, but 6 weeks from now, a lien gets registered on property that delays closing because you didn't know about it. So I always suggest 2 weeks before closing is a reasonable period of time to find any issues that might exist and have time to fix them, but not really a whole lot of time left for new problems to crop up. So that's why I suggest that. Right here, present use. This one I'm seeing often, again, people forgetting or intentionally leaving this blank. And it's grammatically correct, right? And that its present use may be lawfully continued in the principal building, et cetera, et cetera. So leaving it blank means that it's grammatically correct, but it's not technically correct in my opinion. Okay, and Connor and I have had a conversation about this a few times. If it's a single-family residential, then put in single-family residential here. By saying that, both the buyer and the seller are saying yes, that it's a single-family residence and it may be continued. If it's a duplex and you put in duplex here, then again, both the buyer and seller are agreeing, yes, it's a duplex and we understand we can continue to use it that way. But if you don't put that in there and there's some issue, a secondary suite is a good one, right? So a single family residence with secondary suite would be what you would put in there. If you leave it blank though, and the buyer assumed that the secondary suite was legal, the seller assumed that it was illegal and that everybody knew it was illegal, you can get yourself in a lot of hot water. So put it in here, and then you've got a buyer and seller agreeing, yes, this is appropriate and legal and maybe lawfully continued. By leaving it blank, I think you're leaving yourself open to some liability, okay? Signature page. I think you guys are okay with most of this. One issue I'm seeing a lot, again, even in the days of DocuSign when we know it can be tracked, people are filling in the acknowledgement on the first go around. submitting an offer with the acknowledgement signed by the buyer immediately. That's simply incorrect. I acknowledge receipt of my signed copy of this accepted agreement of purchase and sale, etc. If it's not even been presented yet, how the heck can they be filling this thing in? It's just not right, okay? This acknowledgement section, by the way, it's not really substantive. It's not part of the contract. It's just an acknowledgement that they got their signed copy. So filling this in advance, to me, is just, frankly, laziness. I don't want to have to send one more email, or I don't want to have to visit my client one more time to get this thing signed. So I'm going to get it done now and get it out of the way. But here's the problem. You use DocuSign to get this done and you have your client sign here. It's dated. It's in the audit trail forever, forever. So if questioned, you can't prove that you did it at the right time. You know, it's one thing to, you know, be off by a few minutes, but this will be off by a day. So just watch that. And down to Schedule A, we've gone through a few times on how to create clauses for Schedule A, but I'm happy to answer your questions. I am running out of time on my my Zoom meeting here, but if you have anything, any questions, please, now's the time.
The same thing I see with the commission trust agreement is it comes to you signed when they send the offer.
Yeah.
And it again says the same thing about, you know, this should be signed upon the acceptance of the offer.
Yeah, that I'm less concerned about that one because it doesn't deal with the clients. You're right,
Yeah.
but it doesn't deal with the clients acknowledging receipt of a signed agreement. So I'm less concerned about that one, but you're
Okay.
absolutely right. Okay. In fact, this talks about a cooperating brokerage. If we're doing multiple rep or you know, even single representation with a customer, this doesn't really need to even be signed because it's in-house,
Right.
right?
Right.
It's when you're dealing with a cooperating brokerage, then you've got to deal with a commission trust agreement. But when it's in-house and this doesn't get signed, I don't care. Doesn't matter. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? Okay. That's all she wrote, guys. If I'm going to make a copy of this and post it in the Facebook group just like I always do. So any new questions come up, type them in there and I'll be happy to try to answer them for you. Okay. Thanks a lot, guys.
Thanks, Doug.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Doug. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.